You think ranchers only ate beans and beef jerky around the campfire? Think again. These American cattle ranches and homesteads served up some of the most resourceful, comfort-packed, and surprisingly sophisticated meals in frontier history. From three-bean salad that sustained entire bunkhouses to wild turkey roasted over open flames, these aren't nostalgic fantasies. They're real dishes served to real ranch families across the Great Plains, Southwest Territories, and mountain ranges from the 1850s through the 1960s. Let's dig into 25 forgotten ranchers' dinners that fed generations of cowboys, homesteaders, and frontier families, but have nearly vanished from modern tables. Three-bean salad, the ranch wife's secret weapon for feeding unexpected hands. Back in the 1930s through 1960s across cattle country, from Montana to Texas, three-bean salad became the backbone of ranch hospitality. When extra cowboys showed up for branding season, ranch wives needed something that could feed a crowd without breaking the budget. You'd start with 3 pounds of beans, fresh snapped green beans, mixed with canned kidneys and wax beans. The dressing came together fast: apple cider vinegar, white sugar, vegetable oil, and heavy black pepper. Slice in raw onion rings, let it marinate overnight in a crock, and you had something that actually got better sitting in the root cellar. The vinegar base meant it lasted days without refrigeration. This wasn't just convenience, it was ranch economics showing up at every church social and funeral dinner. Today's picnic versions are pale imitations of the original. Green Bean Casserole. Before it became a Thanksgiving cliché, this was serious ranch winter food. In the 1940s and 50s, when ranch families across the Midwest endured months of frozen ground, green bean casserole represented culinary innovation. Campbell's Test Kitchen created it in 1955, and it spread through ranch country because it solved how to make preserved vegetables feel like a treat. Ranch wives who'd been serving plain canned beans all winter suddenly had something special. Start with 2 cans of green beans, drained completely. Mix them with a full can of cream of mushroom soup, the ranch wife's miracle ingredient that arrived by mail order. Add a cup of milk and a heavy handful of grated sharp cheddar from the Dairy Cooperative. Top it with those crispy fried onions from the can, a luxury item. Bake it in cast iron until bubbling and golden, creating comfort during brutal prairie winters. Chuck wagon stew. The original one-pot wonder that kept trail drives moving across 1,000 miles of open range. From the 1860s through the early 1900s, chuck wagon cooks fed entire cattle crews with this hearty concoction made in massive Dutch ovens over open fires. The cook started before dawn, browning whatever beef was available, usually tough cuts from cattle that couldn't make the journey. Into the pot went potatoes, onions, carrots, and canned tomatoes when available. The secret was cooking it low and slow for hours while the herd moved, letting the tough beef break down into tender chunks. Cowboys got thick slices of sourdough bread to soak up the rich, peppery broth. The beauty was its flexibility. Dried beans, wild game, or foraged vegetables all found their way in. This stew meant survival on the trail, hot food after 18-hour days in the saddle, and the difference between a successful drive and a failed one. Chili con carne. Texas ranchers didn't invent chili, but they perfected it into ranch country legend. In the 1880s through 1920s, South Texas cattle operations served chili that bore little resemblance to modern versions. Real ranch chili started with chunks of beef, not ground meat, from older steers, browned hard in rendered sweat. The chili peppers came dried from Mexico, toasted until fragrant, then ground into powder with cumin seeds and Mexican oregano. No tomatoes, no beans. Those came later when city folks got involved. Ranch cooks simmered it for hours in cast iron, the meat falling apart into strands, the sauce thick enough to coat a spoon. The heat was serious, designed to warm you from inside during cold nights on the range. Cowboys ate it with cornbread or saltines, washing it down with strong coffee. This was working food, meant to stick to your ribs and fuel hard labor under the brutal Texas sun. Dakota fried tomatoes. When garden tomatoes came on heavy in late summer, Dakota ranch wives turned them into something magical. Across the northern plains from the 1920s through 1950s, this dish used up green tomatoes before the first frost could ruin them. Slice those firm green tomatoes thick, dredge them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, and fry them in bacon grease until golden and crispy outside, tangy and firm inside. The cornmeal gave serious crunch while the tomato stayed almost pickle-like, tart, vegetal, substantial. Ranch families served them alongside eggs at breakfast or with fried chicken at supper. The bacon fat added a smoky depth that made even the simplest meal feel indulgent. This was practical cooking at its finest, using what you had before winter came. Today's southern fried green tomatoes claim the fame, but Dakota ranch cooks were doing it decades earlier. Succotash. Native American wisdom transformed into rancher sustenance. Across western ranch country from the 1870s onward, succotash became a summer staple when gardens exploded with corn and beans. The name comes from Narragansett, meaning broken corn kernels, but ranch versions evolved into something heartier. Cut fresh corn off the cob, mix it with just picked lima beans or butter beans. Cook it all in heavy cream with chunks of salt pork. The corn's sweetness balanced the beans' earthiness, while the pork added a savory backbone. Ranch cooks knew to scrape the corn cobs with a knife edge, releasing that milky liquid that thickened everything beautifully. This dish showed up at Sunday dinners and community gatherings throughout summer. It represented abundance after lean winter months, proof the ranch was prospering. Modern frozen succotash misses entirely what made this special. Peak season vegetables, farm-fresh dairy, and home-cured pork combining into pure comfort. Scalloped tomatoes. When tomatoes overwhelmed the ranch garden every August, scalloped tomatoes saved the day. From the 1930s through 1960s across Midwest ranches, this casserole turned bushels of ripe tomatoes into something dinner-worthy. Peel and chop fresh tomatoes, layer them with torn white bread pieces, diced onions, and a heavy dose of white sugar to cut the acidity. Dot with butter, season with salt and pepper, and bake until the bread soaked up all that tomato juice, creating a custardy texture with crispy edges. The sugar was critical. It transformed sharp tomatoes into something almost dessert-like, though it stayed firmly on the savory side. Ranch kids who normally avoided vegetables would eat this willingly. It used up day-old bread, abundant tomatoes, and basic pantry staples, stretching the food budget during harvest season when every penny counted. This disappeared as people forgot how to cook from scratch. Broccoli rice casserole. The 1960s brought this ranch dinner staple when frozen broccoli became available at rural stores. Ranch wives across cattle country embraced it as proof they were modern, sophisticated cooks. Cook white rice until tender, mix it with frozen broccoli that's been thawed, add a full can of cream of mushroom soup, a jar of Cheese Whiz, and condensed milk. Pour it into a buttered casserole dish. Top with crushed Ritz crackers mixed with melted butter and bake until golden and bubbling. The Cheese Whiz melted into a creamy sauce that coated every grain of rice and broccoli florée. This was ranch innovation, taking convenience foods and making them special enough for company. It showed up at potlucks, church suppers, and holiday tables throughout the 60s and 70s. Kids ate their vegetables without complaining. Today, it seems dated, but it represented progress and pride for ranch families embracing modernity. German potato salad. German and Czech immigrants brought this to ranch country, where it became a warm weather staple. Unlike mayo-based versions, ranch German potato salad was served warm and vinegary. Boil red potatoes until tender but firm. Slice them thick while still hot. Fry bacon until crispy. Remove it. Then cook diced onions in that bacon fat until golden. Add apple cider vinegar, a little sugar, and pour this hot dressing over the potatoes. The heat made the potatoes absorb all those flavors, smoky, tangy, slightly sweet. Crumble that bacon on top. Add fresh parsley if you had it. This traveled well to outdoor gatherings, staying safe in summer heat because of the vinegar. Ranch families with German heritage served it at every celebration, connecting them to the old country while building new lives on the plains. It paired perfectly with grilled meats and was substantial enough to be a meal itself during haying season. Lamb roast. Sheep ranching across the Mountain West created this forgotten tradition. From Montana to New Mexico in the early 1900s, lamb roast was Sunday dinner on operations that ran sheep alongside cattle. Take a leg of lamb, stab it all over with a knife, and shove slivers of fresh garlic deep into the meat. Rub it down with rosemary, either wild stuff gathered from the hills or dried from the kitchen garden, along with salt, pepper, and olive oil if you were fancy. Roast it in a Dutch oven with potatoes, carrots, and onions arranged around it, everything getting coated in those lamb drippings. The meat came out tender and gamey, with a crust darkened by herbs. The vegetables turned golden and absorbed all that rich flavor. This was celebration food, served when the wool clip sold well or lambing season succeeded. Town folks looked down on lamb, preferring beef, but sheep ranchers knew it was superior eating, more flavorful, more tender, and just as practical. Cowboy cornbread casserole. When the ranch was short on supplies, this one-dish meal saved supper. Across Texas and Oklahoma ranches in the 1940s and 50s, cowboy cornbread casserole stretched ground beef into feeding a bunkhouse full of hungry hands. Brown a pound of ground beef with diced onions and peppers. Season it heavy with chili powder, cumin, and garlic. Mix in a can of beans, pinto or kidney, and a can of corn with its liquid. Pour this into a cast iron skillet, then top it with cornbread batter made from scratch. Cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, and melted lard. Bake until the cornbread turned golden and crusty on top while the beef mixture bubbled up around the edges. Cut it into wedges and serve it straight from the skillet. The cornbread soaked up all those spicy juices, turning almost dumpling-like underneath while staying crispy on top. This was cowboy comfort food, substantial, flavorful, and made from ingredients any ranch kept on hand. Chicken and rice soup. When a laying hen stopped producing, she went straight into the soup pot. Ranch wives across the Great Plains knew how to transform tough old birds into tender, flavorful soup. This wasn't quick cooking. It took all day, simmering that hen with onions, carrots, and celery until the meat fell off the bones. Pull out the chicken, strip off the meat, return it to the pot with white rice, and let it cook until the rice absorbed all that rich broth. The result was thick, almost stew-like, with shreds of tender chicken and vegetables in every spoonful. Fresh parsley and black pepper finished it. Ranch families served this when someone was sick, when the weather turned cold, or when the budget was tight. That old hen cost nothing but her keep, and she'd feed the family for 2 days. The rice stretched it even further, turning 4 pounds of chicken into enough soup for a week. This was resourcefulness and respect for the animals that sustained you. Pork chops and rice. Monday night on the ranch often meant pork chops and rice. Simple, economical, and satisfying. Ranch families who raised hogs had pork available year-round, especially after fall butchering. Take thick-cut pork chops, brown them hard in a cast-iron skillet with lard, getting a serious crust on both sides. Remove the chops, add diced onions to the drippings. Cook them until soft. Pour in chicken broth, add white rice, nestle those pork chops on top, cover tight, and let it all simmer until the rice absorbed every drop of liquid. The rice cooked in all that pork flavor, the onions sweetened, and the chops stayed moist and tender. Season it with sage from the kitchen garden. Add black pepper, maybe some canned mushrooms if you were feeling fancy. This was weeknight food that required minimal attention. Put it on the stove and do evening chores while it cooked. The whole family ate from one skillet, simple and satisfying. Tater tot hot dish. Minnesota and North Dakota ranch families created this casserole in the 1950s when frozen tater tots hit rural grocery stores. Hot dish was what Midwesterners called casseroles, and this became the most iconic version. Brown ground beef with onions, seasoned with salt and pepper, spread it in a casserole dish. Mix in a can of cream of mushroom soup. Add frozen mixed vegetables, peas, corn, carrots, and green beans. Top the whole thing with a thick layer of frozen tater tots, arranged like soldiers. Then sprinkle shredded cheddar cheese over everything. Bake until the tots turned golden and crispy, while the beef mixture bubbled underneath. The cheese melted into the crevices between tots, creating pockets of gooey deliciousness. This fed ranch families cheaply and filled up hungry kids and hired hands. It traveled well to potlucks and tasted even better as leftovers. Today, it's a Minnesota joke, but it was serious comfort food for ranch families surviving brutal northern winters.
Thank y'all so much for tuning.
Wild turkey roast. Before ranch country was fully settled, wild turkeys roamed everywhere, and smart ranchers knew how to hunt them. From the 1880s through 1940s, wild turkey roast was Thanksgiving and Christmas across rural America. These birds were smaller, leaner, and more flavorful than domestic turkeys, all dark meat with a gamey edge. You had to brine them overnight in salt water, or they'd cook up dry and tough. Stuff them with wild onions, sage, and stale bread, rub the outside with lard or bacon fat, and roast them slow in a Dutch oven or cast iron roaster. The meat emerged deeply flavored, almost venison-like, requiring sharp knives and strong teeth. Ranch families appreciated these birds because they cost nothing but ammunition and effort. You'd serve them with all the fixings: mashed potatoes, gravy made from the drippings, biscuits, and whatever preserved vegetables remained in the cellar. This was frontier abundance, proof that the land could still provide. Chicken livers with gravy. When you butchered chickens on the ranch, nothing went to waste. Chicken livers became a cherished treat for those who appreciated their rich, mineral flavor. Across ranch country in the 1930s and 40s, chicken livers with gravy showed up at breakfast or supper, served over biscuits or toast. Dust the livers in seasoned flour, fry them quickly in bacon grease until just browned outside, but still pink inside. Overcooking turned them grainy and bitter. Remove them. Make gravy in the same pan with flour, milk, and black pepper, creating something thick and country style. Those livers were creamy, almost buttery inside, with an earthy intensity that paired perfectly with the peppery gravy. Ranch kids either loved them or refused them entirely. Adults knew they were nutritional powerhouses, packed with iron and vitamins that sustained hard physical labor. Today, people avoid organ meats, but ranch families understood the value of eating the whole animal. Stewed hen and noodles. Old laying hens became stewed hen and noodles, a ranch Sunday dinner tradition that transformed tough birds into tender comfort food. After a hen's productive years ended, ranch wives knew the secret: long, slow cooking in a stock pot with onions, carrots, celery, and bay leaves. Simmer that bird for 3 hours until the meat fell off the bones in tender shreds. Strain the broth, return it to the pot with all that chicken meat, and drop in homemade egg noodles, wide, thick ones rolled and cut by hand. Cook until the noodles were tender and had absorbed much of that rich broth, creating something between soup and stew. Season with salt, black pepper, and fresh parsley. Serve it in deep bowls with biscuits on the side for soaking up the broth. This was economical cooking at its finest. A bird that cost nothing but feed became a meal that fed 6 people with leftovers for Monday. Noodle and beef bake. Before Hamburger Helper existed, ranch wives made noodle and beef bake from scratch. Across Midwest ranches in the 1950s, this casserole stretched ground beef into feeding large families. Cook egg noodles until tender, brown ground beef with onions and garlic, mix them together with canned tomatoes, sour cream, and cottage cheese. The cottage cheese was key. It melted into something almost ricotta-like, adding creaminess and protein. Layer it all in a casserole dish, top with shredded cheddar cheese, and bake until bubbly and golden. The result tasted surprisingly sophisticated for such simple ingredients. The tomatoes added acidity, the sour cream richness, and the beef substance. Ranch families served this with a simple green salad or canned green beans, calling it a complete meal. It was early fusion cooking, combining Eastern European noodle traditions with American beef and convenience ingredients. This filled up ranch hands after long days and required ingredients every ranch kept stocked. Cheeseburger casserole. The 1960s brought convenience cooking to ranch country, and cheeseburger casserole embodied that shift. Ranch wives, tired of standing over hot stoves, wanted something that cooked itself. Brown ground beef with diced onions. Season it with salt, pepper, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce. Mix in cooked elbow macaroni, a can of tomato soup, and shredded American cheese, the kind that came pre-sliced in individual wrappers. Pour it into a casserole dish, top with more cheese and crushed potato chips, then bake until everything melted together. The potato chips added unexpected crunch and salt. The cheese created stretchy, gooey strings, and the tomato soup tied it together with tangy sweetness. Kids loved this because it tasted like fast food, which was still a novelty in rural areas. Ranch families appreciated how it used simple pantry staples and fed a crowd cheaply. This represented American ranch cooking evolving from frontier survival to suburban convenience, even in remote cattle country. Ham loaf with brown sugar glaze. When rural families butchered hogs, they used every bit, and ham loaf elevated leftover ham into company-worthy fare. Popular across ranch country from the 1940s through 1970s, this combined ground ham with ground pork and beef mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and milk. Form it into a loaf, but here's what made it special: that brown sugar glaze. Mix brown sugar with apple cider vinegar, dry mustard, and a touch of ground cloves, brush it over the loaf, and let it caramelize in the oven. The exterior turned sticky sweet and lacquered while the meat stayed moist inside. The combination of sweet and salty, tangy and savory made this memorable. Slice it thick and serve it with mashed potatoes and green beans. Ranch families served ham loaf for Easter, Sunday dinners, and when the preacher came calling. It showed you could afford to butcher your own hogs and had the skill to make something refined from humble ingredients. This disappeared as processed lunch meats replaced home-cured ham. Beef and potato pie. When beef was plentiful, but the budget was tight, ranch wives stretched it with beef and potato pie. Across Montana and Wyoming ranches in the 1920s through 1950s, this hearty dish fed large families from 1 pound of ground beef. Brown the beef with diced onions and carrots, season heavy with black pepper, sage, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce. Layer it in a deep pie dish with thinly sliced potatoes, those starchy russets that stored all winter in the root cellar. Pour beef broth over everything until it nearly reached the top, dot with butter, and cover with a thick crust made from lard and flour. Bake slow until the potatoes turn tender and the crust golden brown. Cut into it, and the filling was almost stew-like, the potatoes having absorbed all that beefy gravy. Ranch families ate this with pickled beets and coleslaw, calling it a complete meal. This was winter food, substantial, warming, and made entirely from what the ranch produced or preserved. Milk gravy and biscuits. When the ranch was between paychecks, milk gravy and biscuits kept families fed. This wasn't just breakfast, it was sometimes the only meal hardscrabble ranchers could afford during lean times. Across the Great Plains from the 1880s through 1940s, this dish represented both poverty and comfort. Fry salt pork or bacon until the fat rendered out. Remove the meat and make a roux with flour right in that grease. Add whole milk slowly, whisking constantly, creating a thick white gravy studded with browned bits. Season heavy with black pepper, sometimes called poor man's seasoning because it was all folks could afford. Pour this over split buttermilk biscuits. Add those crispy pork pieces on top. The result was creamy, peppery, rich with pork fat, and filling enough to fuel a morning of hard labor. Ranch kids grew up on this, eating it 3 times a week during winter. It taught them that simple ingredients, treated right, could be deeply satisfying. Vinegar pie. When the ranch was too far from town to get fresh lemons, vinegar pie satisfied the craving for something sweet and tart. Depression-era ranch families across the Midwest made this desperation pie that tasted surprisingly like lemon meringue. Mix apple cider vinegar with sugar, butter, eggs, and a little flour. Pour it into an unbaked pie shell and bake until set. The vinegar's acidity mellowed in the oven, creating a custard that was tangy, sweet, and oddly sophisticated. The top formed a thin skin while the inside stayed creamy. Some ranch wives topped it with meringue made from egg whites and more sugar, browned lightly under the broiler. Others served it plain with whipped cream if they had extra. This pie showed up at church socials where it competed with fancier desserts made by town ladies. Ranch families knew its secret, that it cost almost nothing but tasted like something special, proof that poverty didn't mean sacrificing pleasure. Fried rabbit with cream gravy. Before chicken became cheap and plentiful, ranch families ate rabbit, lots of it. Across western ranch country from the 1880s through 1950s, wild cottontails and jackrabbits provided free protein. Young rabbits were best, tender and mild-flavored. Cut them into pieces like chicken, soak them overnight in salted water to remove any gamey taste, then dredge in seasoned flour. Fry them in lard or bacon grease until golden and crispy, the meat staying moist inside its crunchy coating. Make cream gravy in the same pan, scraping up all those browned bits, adding flour and milk until thick and peppery. The rabbit tasted like the most delicate chicken you'd ever eaten. Fine-grained, slightly sweet, nothing at all like the tough jackrabbits cowboys complained about. Serve it with mashed potatoes, biscuits, and that rich gravy. Ranch kids hunted rabbits after school, bringing home dinner and learning self-reliance. This was frontier abundance hiding in plain sight. Neck bones and beans. Neck bones and beans, the ultimate waste not, want not protein bomb that turned butcher scraps into Sunday supper gold. In the 1930s through the 1960s, urban butchers across Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago would practically give away pork neck bones, those knobby vertebrae left after cutting prime chops. African-American families migrating north during the Great Migration brought Southern cooking wisdom that transformed these throwaway bones into family treasure. You'd simmer those bones for 3 to 4 hours in a heavy pot with onions, garlic, and bay leaves until the meat fell off in tender shreds and the marrow melted into a rich, gelatinous broth. Then you'd add navy beans or pintos that had soaked overnight, letting everything cook down until thick and creamy. The collagen from the bones created this silky, almost gravy-like consistency that coated every bean. This wasn't just dinner, it was survival cooking elevated to art, feeding 6 people for under $2. Before we move on to the next food, don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic videos from the 1930s through the 1980s. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze was the ultimate American dinner workhorse, appearing on tables from apartments to farmhouses at least twice monthly. From the Depression through the 1970s, this humble loaf stretched ground beef further than any other preparation, mixing it with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, eggs, milk, and diced onions to bulk up the meat. Working-class cooks added whatever needed using up, leftover oatmeal, rice, even mashed potatoes to make the expensive beef go further. You'd pack this mixture into a loaf pan, though smart cooks free-formed it on a sheet pan so the edges got crispy all around. The signature move was slathering the top with a mixture of ketchup, brown sugar, and sometimes mustard that caramelized into a sweet, tangy glaze as it baked. After an hour in the oven, you'd have this beautiful mahogany loaf that sliced cleanly, with moist, tender interior and crusty edges. Served with mashed potatoes and green beans, meatloaf was reliable, comforting, and guaranteed to provide tomorrow's meatloaf sandwiches, arguably even better than the original dinner. Fried liver with mashed potatoes. Fried liver with mashed potatoes was the iron-rich powerhouse that kept steel workers and miners functioning before vitamin supplements existed. From the 1920s through the 1960s, beef or pork liver cost a fraction of steak prices, making it the go-to protein for families watching every nickel. Mothers would soak thick liver slices in milk for an hour to draw out the bitter, metallic taste, then dredge them in seasoned flour mixed with salt, pepper, and sometimes paprika. The liver hit a screaming hot cast-iron skillet with bacon grease, cooking just 2 minutes per side until crusty brown outside, but still slightly pink inside. Overcooked liver turned into shoe leather that even hungry kids refused. Meanwhile, potatoes boiled until fork tender got mashed with butter and milk into creamy clouds. The key was cooking onions low and slow in that same bacon grease until caramelized and sweet, then piling them over the liver. This dish meant business. It delivered the nutrients exhausted bodies needed after 10-hour shifts in dangerous conditions. Vienna sausage and rice. Vienna sausage and rice was the quick-fix protein that kept families fed when the paycheck ran thin toward month's end. These tiny, pale sausages packed in cans appeared in working-class pantries from the 1940s onward as emergency rations that lasted forever on the shelf. You'd pop open the can, drain the gelatinous liquid, and either heat those little sausages in a skillet or dump them straight from the can over steaming rice. Some cooks got fancy, making gravy from the can liquid mixed with flour and milk, or adding soy sauce for Asian-inspired flavor. Others simply served them with ketchup or mustard. The texture was soft and slightly spongy, the flavor mild and salty, and kids either loved them or refused to eat them under any circumstances. This meal cost under 50 cents total and took 10 minutes from pantry to table. It wasn't impressive or nutritious or particularly delicious, but it was protein and carbs when nothing else was available. This was survival eating, the kind of dinner that kept families going between paychecks without drama or pretense. Ham and broccoli casserole. Ham and broccoli casserole took the Easter or Christmas ham bone and stretched it through another 3 dinners with 1960s processed food magic. After the holiday feast, frugal cooks would cube every scrap of leftover ham while frozen broccoli florets, a modern miracle in working-class kitchens, thawed on the counter. You'd blanch that broccoli just until bright green, then layer it in a greased casserole with the ham cubes. The sauce was pure convenience food alchemy, cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, whisked with milk, sharp cheddar cheese, and maybe a dash of mustard powder for zip. Pour that creamy mixture over everything. Top with crushed Ritz crackers mixed with melted butter and bake until golden and bubbling. The broccoli stayed slightly crisp, the ham got tender, and that cracker topping added essential crunch. This was suburban casserole culture at its peak, where opening cans and bags counted as cooking, but the result still brought families together around the Formica table. Fish sticks with tater tots. Fish sticks with tater tots, the frozen food revolution that turned every Friday into Catholic fish night and every weeknight into a 15-minute miracle. When Gorton's introduced breaded fish sticks in 1953 and Ore-Ida launched tater tots in 1954, working mothers discovered their secret weapon against exhaustion. You'd preheat the oven, dump frozen fish sticks on one side of a baking sheet and frozen tater tots on the other, then slide it all in while still wearing your work clothes. 20 minutes later, dinner was done, crispy, golden, and requiring zero thought or skill. The fish sticks delivered mild, flaky white fish inside a crunchy coating, while tater tots brought that salty, potatoey crunch kids devoured by the handful. Served with ketchup for the tots and tartar sauce for the fish, if you were fancy, this meal symbolized post-war American convenience culture. It wasn't homemade in the traditional sense, but it was fast, affordable, and consistent, the holy trinity for families where both parents worked. This dinner said, "We're modern now, embracing technology and convenience without apology." Tuna burgers. Tuna burgers, the weird but wonderful protein patty that stretched expensive beef into 3 more dinners during wartime rationing and beyond. During World War II and lingering through the 1960s in budget-conscious homes, canned tuna became the miracle ingredient that could impersonate almost any meat. You'd drain 2 cans of tuna, flake it apart, then mix it with breadcrumbs, beaten eggs, minced onion, and sometimes pickle relish or celery for crunch. Some cooks added a spoonful of mayonnaise for moisture and richness. These tuna patties got formed like hamburgers, then pan-fried in butter or oil until golden brown and crispy on both sides. Served on hamburger buns with lettuce, tomato, and mayo or tartar sauce, they looked almost like regular burgers until that first bite revealed the oceanic truth. Kids either loved them or staged dinner table rebellions, but mothers loved how 2 79-cent cans could feed 6 people. This was make-do cooking that worked, even if nobody would confuse it with actual beef.